Hi everyone, how's it going? So this is an update video on how Chester got on with the 24-hour methotrexate. So if you watched the previous video, you will know that myself and Laura were very worried about Chester being on the chemo for 24 hours. And if I'd known how much of a disaster our visit and stay at the centre, the treatment centre, would have been, then yeah, I rightfully was correct to be worried. So overall, the actual treatment itself, Chester being on the 24-hour methotrexate, he flushed it out very fast, which is what you're supposed to do. So you get put onto this chemo, he's on it for 24 hours, he also has fluids at the same time, and once you come off of it, then it's all about basically getting that chemo back out of his body. So he did this very quickly, which is good news, and obviously the chemo helped. It did what it needed to do. But during the treatment, so this is when everything was a bit of a disaster. So when we first got to the treatment centre, we were asked where his imatanib tablets were. Luckily I did bring a couple, but myself and Laura were not aware that we had to actually bring Chester's chemo. So straight away we got there, we didn't have his chemo, and that wasn't great because then the nurses and that had to try and get some imatinib tablets and stuff. So that's not the end of the world, but it would have been nice if we had known. So a bit of preparation would have been good. Not only that, I was then told that I had to basically do all of Chester's chemo. So I had to do what I normally would do, the imatinib. So I had to do that, and then I also had to do the new chemo, which he has been on before, the mercaptopurine. However, keep in mind, this now comes in a liquid form because Chester's got an NG tube. So I've never done this through his NG tube. So once we got there, and later on in that evening, I got given all of Chester's imatinib tablets, so the strip and everything that I gave them, and then they also brought along the mercaptopurine, which I've not done before. So I had to obviously do what I normally do, dissolve his imatinibs and prepare them, ready to give to him. But where we're in this small room, there wasn't anywhere really to prepare his chemo. So in the end, I was having to do it on the waste bin, which is not very hygienic. Basically the room's not sanitary, and yeah, I shouldn't be preparing his chemo in there. So I wasn't happy about all this. But anyway, we carried on and I did it, and then we later on at midnight got Chester put onto the fluids. Then the next day he was going to have his high dose of methotrexate, which was supposed to be done during his LP, so his lumbar puncture, where he also has the methotrexate put into his spine and up to his brain. But this didn't happen because basically the results came back on his Wee levels, one at the right level or something, so they couldn't go ahead with that. So we'd still done the LP, but he didn't have the high dose of methotrexate, which was worrying because I was told he had to be on that at the same time as the LP. So I was then having to run around in the morning just trying to find our consultant or someone just to double check if this was not going to be a problem. In the end, I did find out that it's okay to do it 6 hours before or 6 hours after the LP, as long as it's done within a certain time frame. So again, preparation, it would have been nice if I was made aware of that when we got there, and yeah. So anyway, Chester had his LP and everything, came back in the room, and then later on he was put onto the 24-hour methotrexate. Now the thing where this went wrong was when he was on it later on in the day, or evening it was, he's supposed to have it checked every 6 hours. So at the time I wasn't sure why, but I thought it was to ensure that he isn't getting overdose, getting too much chemo put into him at once. So I was panicking. I was then asking the nurses, and the nurse that was dealing with the chemo wasn't available, or for whatever reason. Anyway, it took an hour and 15 minutes to then find out that it was perfectly fine, and it's just to basically ensure they were checking to make sure the chemo was going to finish within the 24 hours. That's why they had to check it every 6 hours to ensure that it's still on track. Now, if I'd known this before, bit of peace of mind, well, I wouldn't have been panicking out of my mind, thinking that my son's been overdosed, or whatever. Anyway, getting too much chemo put into him. Yeah. Anyway, so that was sorted. Yeah. So later on that day or the next morning, he then came off the 24-hour chemo, which was good, and he carried on the fluids. Now, he stayed on these until his wee levels then came down and he'd basically passed out all the methotrexate, which he did do in a decent amount of time. So it didn't take too long. Once that was done, this is when more things ended up happening. So basically, Chester then got, he got a bad tummy. And then we found out later on, it turned into c-diff. So c-diff is some sort of bacterial infection or something within the gut, and this gave Chester a real bad stomach. As you can imagine, I'm not going to go into detail on the video, but all sorts was happening, causing him a lot of pain down there. But anyway, so in the end, because of this, we actually had to get isolated to our room because they didn't want us to spread the c-diff. Even though we were allowed to roam the ward for a few days while he did have a bad tummy, but in the end, once they found out he had c-diff, that was it. This then meant that I couldn't go and get Chester milk, I couldn't go and get his yogurts, I couldn't do anything, I couldn't go and get myself food, we weren't allowed in the kitchens, we were stuck in the room. This wouldn't have been a problem, but obviously we're pressing the button. The nurses, obviously I don't expect them to turn up instantly at a click of the finger, but they were taking sometimes 40 minutes to an hour, and when you've got your poor sick child who wants to have some milk and, yogurt and stuff like that, and he wasn't able to because, they're taking ages to turn up, and then by the time they turn up, he had gone to the loo and stuff, and then it's like, can you take the pan away, the dirty pan, because you have to give them the samples of urine and poo. Basically, yeah, you're pressing the button a lot, and a lot of things were being forgotten about. At one point, we ended up with 3 dirty pans in the toilet, and the smell and stuff was actually making Chester not feel very well. At one point in the morning, he was actually sick as well. So basically, everything was a bit unprepared. Obviously, the hospital couldn't prepare for him. They didn't know he was going to get c-diff, so obviously us being isolated in the room, that's just one of those things. But I think there's room for improvement, just how everything went down. Especially, as I said, me mixing up chemo and stuff on the dirty waste bin and all that. It's not really nice, it's not sanitary, and then the nurses were just passing me syringes, which I didn't have a clue half the time what they were, just saying I need to put this down his NG tube. I was also given the mercaptopurine bottle in liquid, which I've never had before, and I then had to read the bottle to figure out how much Chester needed, so he needed 1 ml, and then I had to obviously get that out into the syringe and give it to him. Now, this was all very stressful, as you know, myself and Laura knows a little bit, but not much about the NG tube. Anyway, we are very new to this, as Chester used to take tablets. So with everything that was going on and all my worry where I want to be there for Chester, focusing on his 24-hour chemo treatment and stuff like that, it just was not ideal. Me then trying to figure out how many imatinibs he had to take, how much of the mercaptopurine, and then also the imatanib, having to leave it on the side for 30-40 minutes, keeping an eye on it and keep stirring it. Also with like the odd cleaner that comes in, and then opening up the bin and stuff near it. So it was very stressful. In the end, I did speak to some nurses in charge, and things got a little bit better, but it didn't really, the next day it then carried on. So I then ended up speaking to the matron, and things did get a lot better. So I am actually currently in talks with one of our nurses who helps a lot. She's great. And then also the matron's going to pass on to the ward in charge, the nurse. So yeah, basically the next time that we go in 2 weeks' time, or no, next week, sorry, everything should be much better, as I've been told that I don't need to, well, mix up his chemo and give it to him because we're under their care and the nurses can do it. So that's that stress gone. I can now have my full attention on Chester, because it was very unfair on Chester. I didn't have anything. I didn't even have water. I was using the water out the jug because, as I said, we couldn't go to the kitchen. So yeah, I didn't have syringes, and then it was just an absolute disaster, to be honest. But other than that, at least Chester absolutely smashed out the high dose of methotrexate. He did actually end up then getting a temperature as well. So his temperature spiked up to like 38.8 or something like that. So he then had to go on to antibiotics as well for that. And then he had antibiotics for the c-diff. He then ended up having an allergic reaction. So we believe the reaction was from him taking this other anti-sickness that he was taking alongside of his ondansetron, which he was having later in the afternoon. Because there's got to be so many hours between, you can take certain anti-sickness medicines. So anyway, he ended up coming up all red and dotty and bumpy on the skin. So that was also, again, basically everything was just happening. So there were a lot of drugs, as you can imagine, just coming in, and then the nurses passing them to me. In the end, obviously, it all got a bit too much. In the end, I actually swapped with Laura. I came home for a few nights, Laura took over, and then we swapped again. And then I told the nurses, basically, I can't do it. It's getting too overwhelming. And obviously, I spoke to the matron. So hopefully next time, I shouldn't have to do any of that. When me and Laura swapped, I actually obviously spoke to Laura on the phone and just wanted to make sure that they had given Chester all his stuff, his normal medication that they should be doing. And it turns out, when I asked her, because it was the weekend, if they'd done the cotrimoxazole, Laura wasn't sure because she doesn't do the NG tube stuff. But anyway, she went to find out from a nurse by pressing the button because she's not allowed to leave the room. Anyway, the nurse that came wasn't sure, and it took over an hour to find out that they didn't actually give Chester his cotrimoxazole. Now, the cotrimoxazole is a standard bit of medicine that they give all the kids on the ward every weekend. Now, this is a medicine that we've been using for months now, as it protects Chester from PCP. So anyway, that was another little concern, because obviously they're supposed to just give it to the kids anyway. So that should have just been done. But instead, Chester was going to miss out because they didn't do it. Luckily, because I checked with Laura and then Laura checked with the nurses, it all got resolved and Chester ended up having his cotrimoxazole. Now you must be thinking, that's a lot that has gone on, and surely there can't be anything else that happened. Well, you're wrong, because also while we were there, Southampton decided Chester's lost quite a bit of weight, and eating biscuits and yogurts throughout the day and little things like that, grazing, doesn't actually appear to be enough. And Chester, like I said in the last video when me and Laura were concerned, is not actually eating enough. And Southampton then decided that we needed to speak to their dietitian. So we spoke to their dietitian, and yes, she said that Chester's not eating enough. He needs to be hitting about 1,200 calories a day. And also, of course, he needs to keep his fluids up, which needs to be around 1,500. So when it comes to the calories, that's what we're going to be talking about right now. Eating biscuits and stuff isn't enough, as the dietitian said. And in the end, we had to try giving Chester food through his NG tube on a food machine. So you can see some pictures right now on the screen. This is Chester on the food machine. And yes, he did not like it at all. But it's very frustrating because we were then locked in this room. So like I said in the video already, we weren't able to then go and get him a yogurt or some blue milk and stuff like that. And we basically just went from, from just when we could maybe give him some food to just full whack straight to a machine, and we need to get food down him now. Even though no one really cared for the last 3 or 4 weeks. as eating a few biscuits here and there is apparently enough. So in the end, the dietitian agreed with me that it's the wrong time to try and put him on a machine to feed through food through his NG tube, as he has a lot going on. He's on the new medicine, he's on this 24-hour chemo and stuff like that. It's just wrong timing. He also had an infection, bad tummy and stuff. So in the end, we got given these food shake things, these like almost like protein shakes, and then we've also got yogurts. So this week, that's mine and Laura's goal. We're trying to get these foods down Chester and avoiding the machine. He does know though, if he carries on refusing to eat or not eating enough, then he will end up going on this food machine, and we're going to have to give that a try. Other than that though, Chester's doing absolutely fantastic. He's he's doing great, as fantastic as he can be doing anyway. His blood levels, can't remember which one, but has gone down, so he's not currently allowed to take the mercaptopurine, as the levels aren't high enough. They need to be up at like 1 or something, and he's on 0.5. So other than that, no mercaptopurine. This week he's just simply on his imatanib. He's on the antibiotic still for the c-diff, just to help get rid of that as well. So I am going to wrap up this video now. If you did like the video, then obviously follow the channel, and if you do, then I will see you in the next one.